When staring at the central mosaic inside the Basilica of Saints Cosmas and Damian in Rome, one is confronted by a startling Christian claim about Jesus Christ.
In this 6th century work, Jesus appears with a toga of an ancient philosopher and a raised arm in the gesture of a teacher. But Jesus is not just another religious guru or wise sage. The light radiating from his golden robe signifies his divinity, and his coming on the fiery clouds points to Jesus as the divine Lord, announcing the last judgment. Jesus will come again to judge the living and the dead.
This is one of the first Christian churches built right in the center of ancient Rome, amid the various pagan shrines that fell into disuse. No doubt this arresting image of Christ would have challenged the Romans of the 6th century to view him not just as a spiritual leader, but as Lord. And it challenges us today to make a similar choice about Christ. Will Jesus be for us just a source of spiritual or ethical wisdom? Or will we accept him truly as Lord of our lives?
Many people today view Jesus just as a good moral teacher, someone who cared for the poor and taught us to love. But the inescapable fact is that Jesus claimed to be so much more. He claimed to be God. And if one understands the Jewish culture of Jesus' day, it's clear he made this provocative claim boldly. For example, Jesus, while teaching in Jerusalem, once said, "Before Abraham was, I am." I am, or in Hebrew, Yahweh, was God's holy name which he revealed to Moses. A 1st century Jew hearing this would hear Jesus alluding to the unutterable name of God and applying it to himself. Jesus also put himself on par with God the Father when he said, "I and the Father are one." His claim to divinity was so clear to the Jewish leaders that they picked up stones to throw at him. They accused him of blasphemy, saying, "You being a man, make yourself God." What are we to do with a man who makes such claims? Will we view him as merely a good moral teacher, or just one of the many religious leaders the world has offered? Or will we accept him as he revealed himself, as God and Lord of our lives?
Curtis, there are so many different religions in the world today and so many different religious leaders throughout human history. What makes Jesus Christ different from all those other religious leaders?
Well, first of all, I think we want to say what makes those leaders the same. And you've got leaders, for example, Muhammad, who's the founder of Islam, who gives a set of moral teachings, and he calls himself a prophet, he's a messenger. Buddha, same thing. I have principles for living that will help you to order your life, but I'm a messenger. Confucius, identical. I'm a messenger. And Jesus is a messenger. But what separates him, he's not only a messenger. Jesus actually makes himself the center. He says, I am not only the messenger, I am the message. He turns to each one of us and says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. In other words, you've got to get our relationship right. That's the heart of Christianity. It's a personal encounter with Jesus Christ, who is the issue. If he is the God he claims to be, then we have to embrace him. And if he isn't, then we should not only ignore him, we should fight against him, because the options are horrendous.
So either Jesus is who he really said he was, or he's not. We have to make a choice. Explain that a little more.
This is the amazing situation that Jesus gives us. He turns to us and says things like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. and makes himself the center. And so he's giving us essentially a choice. And it's brought out by the author C.S. Lewis in his book, Mere Christianity. He says, look, there's three choices. Either Jesus is who he says he is, and you should embrace him. I mean, if he's the Lord of the universe, then it would be the right thing to do would be to embrace that. Or he's not the Lord of the universe, but he's telling you he is. And if he's not, and he's telling you, then one of two things is true. Either he knows he's not, and he's telling you, which means he's a liar, and you would never give your life or embrace a liar.
Or call him a good man.
Yeah, or call him merely a good man. No, he's not a good man. He's a terrible man. He's a terrible liar. Or he thinks he's God, but he isn't, in which case he's a total crazy man. He's a lunatic. So it really we're presented with, you make the choice. Is Jesus Lord, liar, or a lunatic? It's your choice. But to simply sit in the middle and say, I think he's a good moral teacher, is the one option Jesus never left us.
So we can't just say he's a good teacher and I can learn from him and learn from all these other religions and other philosophies, and I'll pick and choose what will work for me.
No, Jesus takes us so seriously that he actually wants you and I, wants every one of us to make a decision about him. He places himself at the center of creation because he is the center of creation. He is the creator, and he's calling us to live in that truth or to acknowledge we're not going to live in that truth. That's our choice, but that's what he wants us to make.
Well, let me ask you more personally, Curtis. This kind of realization about who Jesus really is, when did you come to that? How did that impact your life?
I think like a lot of people, I grew up in a family that had church. I knew the claims of Christianity. And if you had asked me, do you think that Jesus is God? I probably would have said yes, but I hadn't thought about it. And so in the middle of my life, I'm out pursuing all kinds of lesser loves and doing things that are really self-destructive and destructive to my relationships. And then I started to read the scriptures again for the first time as an adult. The Gospels in particular, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And as I was reading them, I experienced what so many others have experienced. I began to encounter the person of Jesus Christ. It was like instead of reading a book, I was watching a movie. And I was imagining Jesus. And then at a certain point in time, something even more extraordinary occurred. I had gotten through Matthew's Gospel and Mark, and I got to Luke chapter 6, verse 46. And it's like I'm watching this movie, and I'm not even aware of turning pages, and I'm imagining Jesus behaving. And all of a sudden I encounter Luke chapter 6, verse 46, and it's as if a word was inserted into the text. The text reads, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you don't do what I say?" When I read it, what I imagined was Jesus saying, "Curtis, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you don't do what I say?" And I realized this was an opportunity for me, standing in the reality of prayer before Christ, hearing him say, "I need you to make a decision. You say I'm Lord, but you don't act like it. I want to call you to repentance, to live differently, to change the way you live, or to be honest and admit you don't think I'm Lord." That was the choice for me. And it wasn't a choice that I made quickly. It was like, oh yeah, well from now on I'll do everything you say. I really spent weeks in anguish saying, this is a fundamental life decision for me. And it should be for everybody. It doesn't have to be around that Bible verse. But Jesus wants to encounter each person on earth and call them to make a decision, a personal decision, based on that encounter of what do I think of him. He turns to us like he turned to the apostles and said, who do you say that I am? And really that's the foundation point of all the rest of our lives.
In your own life, before that critical moment when you chose to have Christ really be number one in your life, were you happy?
I experienced pleasure, and I thought it was the same thing. I pursued pleasure all the time. I thought that pleasure was going to lead to happiness because I hadn't realized that actually it's not pleasure that leads to happiness, it's goodness that leads to happiness. And goodness is living rightly. And so I was busy, and for a period of time in high school, I actually thought that I was happy because I moved from one pleasure to the next. But I had to constantly seek for new pleasures so that I could continue to be happy, which isn't real happiness. Whereas there's a happiness that you can live in peace once you live in right relationship with God, to recognize I actually have a contentment, a peace in my heart because of my right relationship. It's a dramatic difference. I would say it's compared to the happiness you get on a roller coaster, which lasts for a few minutes and then you got to get back in line, or the happiness that you experience when you have a great marriage and you sit back and say, life is good. I mean, in my marriage, even on the worst days of my life, the death of a loved one or some other terrible tragedy, there's a joy in being able to share life with my wife in the midst of the bad times and the good. And that's even more true for our relationship to God, to recognize that He looks at us with such intense passion. He would do anything for us. In fact, He has done everything for us.
When you look out at the world today, do you think people are happy?
I think people are where I was. I think the vast majority of people are running around frantically from one thing to the next. And we see this by the way they distract themselves. I mean, they've got there's earbuds in their ears so that they can listen to their music, and then while they're doing that, they're watching television, and while they're doing that, they're pursuing other pleasures. They're buying jet skis and really cool cars. And again, there's nothing wrong with any one of these things until you recognize what's happening. People are so frantically busy searching for happiness that they're missing what would actually make them happy.
What would you say to people in this modern world that maybe vaguely believe in God, but they haven't put Christ first?
You know, there's a beautiful passage. It's a parable that Jesus gives us in Matthew chapter 13, verse 44, one of his shortest parables, just one verse long. Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid. And for joy over it, he went and sold all that he had to buy that field." To recognize that in many ways, people think of Christianity as somebody who's busy selling all they have so that they can go find the treasure. But that's not Christianity. Jesus says, no, you find the treasure first. And for joy over it, you go and sell all you have. A lot of Christians present their Christian life really heavy. I'm trying to do all the right things I need to do so that hopefully I can get a relationship with God. No, you have a relationship with God. Now go sell everything you have so that you can be free to love him completely. But that's not even the truth about the gospel. The truth about the gospel is when you turn that around and realize when Jesus looks at you or me or anyone else, you know what he sees? He sees a treasure hidden in a field, which he has found. And for joy over you or over me, he went and sold all that he had to buy that field. The key about Christianity is to recognize not that we love God, but that he loves us.